What is up, boys? You fantastic, wonderful people. Today, I thought we're gonna do another tier list, because the hype is back with Guardians 3. Everyone's, praising Marvel again, even though it's only one movie. We can calm down. It was a James Gunn movie more than it was a Marvel movie, but the hype's back. There's no denying it, because it was a good fucking movie. And I figured I wanted to go back and do a tier list of all the Marvel movies, because I thought it deserved that, and we haven't done that treatment yet. So today, ladies and gentlemen, I bring you the official MCU tier list. Let's just start off with the very first film, and boom, that's Iron Man. I mean, what else is there to say than the OG's still one of the best? I am thinking, Iron Man, it's such a good movie. It's more of a character study. It doesn't have the weight of the whole MCU on it that drags it down. It's gotta be in the I saw this movie more than 10 times in theaters row. Absolutely deserved. Great fucking movie. Great start. It's the reason we still have Marvel movies today. Without Iron Man, there would be nothing. Sadly, though, that streak didn't really continue with Incredible Hulk. Incredible Hulk, I mean, this one's treated almost like the black sheep of the MCU, right? Like, I feel like very few people even consider this an MCU film because it's obviously not Mark Ruffalo Hulk, but it still has, Thunderbolt Ross. There's still, it's tied in. Apparently Phase 5 and, Captain America 4, they're gonna start tying more into it. She-Hulk tied into it. So it is in the MCU. People always forget about it. It was also distributed by Universal, which didn't really help it because it's the only one that has been. So I see let's just stop talking about it. It's getting the what the fuck tier. Next up, we have Iron Man 2. While the first Iron Man, I think, is one of the best in the MCU, the second Iron Man is far from that. I think that's largely due to how rushed it feels. Jon Favreau, said he wanted 3 years to write the script for this movie, and they wanted to beeline it in 2. So it feels like it's trying to do too much. It's trying to set up the Avengers while doing, Black Widow, while doing, Iron Man and his health issue stuff. There's just too much going on here. There's not enough action, and none of it really worked. The villain is just another guy that has an Iron Man suit that has scorn for Tony Stark. I'm sure that'll be the last time we have a villain like that, but it's just, it just feels rushed. This is gonna be in the I could have made it better tier. Next up is one of the most underrated films in the MCU to me, Thor. I think the first Thor is hella underrated. I think there's a lot of interesting stuff they were trying to do here. Granted, not all of it works, but I think there's a lot of stuff here that does work for me personally. I love fish out of water stories, so the whole Thor being on Earth and having to learn shit and learn humility and all that. I kind of like stories like that. Loki obviously goes on to be one of the best characters in the MCU, even though he's not yet here. I think this movie has a lot going for it. Chris Hemsworth nails it as Thor, just cements that right away. And I think this one's very, very underrated. While still not being top tier, I'm going to go ahead and put it in the enjoyable movie category because that's what it deserves. Remember, this is the official MCU tier list, so these opinions are final and are no longer opinion, they're a fact. Moving on, we got Captain America, the First Avenger. This one, again, I think is highly underrated. I think the last, hour of this movie is really bland and unoriginal and kind of not very creative. That's what unoriginal means, but whatever. But the first, hour of this movie, the first half, I think knocks it out of the park. I love the underdogness to it in the first the first hour or so, and then the whole just kind of classic origin story for a classic hero. I don't think there's any denying it. I think Captain America the First Avenger goes solid in the enjoyable movie category as well, because I don't think it's quite great. I didn't really describe what I have going on here. So I saw this movie more than 10 times in theaters. I might not have actually seen it 10 times in theaters. That's basically saying it's a good fucking movie. Good movie, no denying. It's a great movie, Then we have enjoyable movie, and that's it's a good movie. It's enjoyable. It's not my top tier, but it's good. And then we have enjoyable but flawed, which is where I know there's flaws to it, but I can't help but just enjoy it still. What the fuck is what the fuck? I could have made it better is pretty self-explanatory. And did anybody watch this? It's just really fucking bad. Why would they even make something like this? With that being said, let's move on to the finale of Phase 1, The Avengers. I'm sorry, Iron Man, you're getting knocked back a slot. because we have a new king in town. The Avengers really nailed it out of the park, and I think it's crazy to think that every, like, studio is trying to release cinematic universes, but the only one that's still nailed the first team-up movie is the Avengers. There's not a single other studio that's done, like, a team-up movie like this and has knocked it out of the park. They insanely knocked it out of the park with this film. It's insanely good. It's such, like, just a classic blockbuster. It came out on my birthday. What more can you love about a movie? It's easily the best film in the first phase, and easily one of the best in the MCU. With that down, that is your Phase 1 official tier list. There is no denying this, by the way. It is fact, written as code, as official as the 10 Commandments. It's set in stone. I don't know what to tell you. That being said, let's move on to Phase 2, Iron Man 3. I think this movie works a lot better if you take it out of the MCU. If you just take this as a Shane Black Iron Man film, I think there's a lot to enjoy here. That doesn't mean I think it's a great film. I still think, because when you try to tie it into the rest of the MCU, it just doesn't work. They didn't know if Robert Downey Jr. was going to continue after this movie, so you kind of have him, you know, leave behind the Iron Man, and then immediately come back in Avengers Age of Ultron. So it's just some plot points don't really, they feel fulfilling at the end of the movie if you just watch the Iron Man movies, but if you continue watching the MCU, some of these plot points just kind of start to fall apart. But I still love Tony's connection to the kid. The villain's very forgettable. I don't even remember his name. I just know that, like, he, like, lit on fire and stuff, and that was kind of his thing. The Mandarin twist is still one of the worst twists of all time. So bad that they had to retcon it in Shang-Chi, but whatever. I still think it's a very fun movie with some incredible action. I am going to put it, we're gonna put it above Captain America the First Avenger, but not above Thor. It's gonna go right there. Next up on the list, we have Thor the Dark World. Man, this movie is awful. Kind of like Iron Man 3, none of the plot, like the few emotional plot points here, like Loki's death and stuff, are retconned by the end of the movie. The villain is only memorable because of how forgettable he is. So that it just kind of takes all the urgency out of the movie when you don't give a shit what happens, and you don't give a shit about what the villain's doing. You don't care really about the hero taking him out because you don't care about the villain. All the urgency is gone. Loki's death is super stupid, because especially since it's just immediately retconned, like I just said. Yeah, there's not a lot to love about this movie. So it goes in the did anybody watch this? Because I don't think they actually, like, watched it before putting it out. I think they just blindly made it and put it into fucking theaters. Okay, we move on to one of the best in the MCU. Boom! Captain America the Winter Soldier. This movie fucking slaps. They took, like, a political thriller and just put it into the MCU, and it ties so well into Captain America Civil War. Bucky Barnes is such a good villain, and he's continued on through the MCU, obviously, and it's just, oh, everything about this movie fucking slaps, dude. The action's the one thing that probably doesn't fully slap. I think it's not bad, but it's just really choppy, and they go full into the cuts every 5 seconds. Not even 5 seconds, like every 2 seconds you're gonna cut, and there's, like, severe shaky cam. This is where that type of action really started in the MCU, and that action doesn't really work too well. But other than that, there's nothing that doesn't work in this film. I think it goes solemnly at the top of the MCU for right now. Fantastic movie. They knocked it out of the park at this one. This was Marvel's kind of first streak, because right after that, we got, boom, Guardians of the Galaxy. Guardians of the Galaxy was such a surprise. I remember it being really, like, the talk of the school. This movie came out when I was in, like, middle school, I think. And man, I remember, like, everyone was talking about the stupid thing in the trailer when he, like, does the middle finger. He's like, oh, I'm sorry, I didn't know how this thing worked. That was, like, literally everyone was doing that back in middle school. And man, the film's just, the humor, the emotional moments. Like, if you can have a tree say "We are Groot" and have it be super emotional, you know you've done something right, and everything works in this film. I love how it ties into especially Guardians 3, which we'll get to in a bit. But yeah, no, this movie definitely, just like the others in this top tier Marvel, deserves to be up there with its brethren. One of the best to do it. Boom! Avengers Age of Ultron. This was kind of the biggest disappointment, because I love most of the Avengers films. This is one that I really love. There's so much good in this movie that it pains me to put it as low as I'm gonna put it, because it's just, even though there is a lot of good, I love Vision. I love the whole, picking up the hammer scene, how that's tied into Endgame. I love all the characters, obviously. The film's just trying to do too much. They decided after the success of the first Avengers and how they made that simple and just a contained story, we get these 6 Avengers coming together to, save the day. They decided to go so much bigger and so much more plot lines, and it feels a bit overcrowded a little bit. I don't know. It's hard to rewatch because every time I rewatch it, I like it a little bit less. I still think though, with how enjoyable the characters are, it deserves enjoyable but flawed. I enjoy the movie, but there's no denying there's a lot of flaws with it, and it was just super crowded. There's not enough space to breathe in this movie. They're constantly jumping from one thing to the next. You got to set up Thor Ragnarok. You got to set up Civil War. It's just, yeah, they did a little bit too much in this movie. With that movie doing a little bit too much, they decided to dial it back and go right into Ant-Man. A simple, self-contained story with a charismatic lead and some fun side characters. I am unapologetically a big fan of the first Ant-Man. I really think the first Ant-Man works. I love Luis. I think that's half the reason Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania didn't work, because there wasn't Luis. I think Paul Rudd's great as this kind of, not really hero, but hero, like he's shoved into being a hero even though he doesn't want to be, and Paul Rudd's just charismatic and you love seeing him on screen. And the final fight, it's memorable because even though the villain's super forgettable in this movie, the setting and how they just went so small and they're literally fighting on the Thomas the Tank Engine train set, it fits the movie, and it's honestly one of the most memorable final fights for that, just because of how creative it gets with the premise of the movie. I absolutely love this first one. It's not good enough to be top tier Marvel because it's just the villain mainly drags it down from the top tier Marvel. But man, other than the villain, I love pretty much everything that's going on with this film. It gets good movie, no denying. Fuck your opinion. Then we go into Captain America Civil War. This came out the same year as Batman v Superman, and it's such a good study as to why this film worked, but Batman v Superman didn't. Is because these two characters right here were set up over the course of there was 8 years of films before this, and each of their opinions is based off of the previous films. Captain America's coming off of Captain America the Winter Soldier, where he sees how twisted the government is and how corrupt governments are bad and doesn't want to be controlled by them. But then you have Tony Stark, who coming off the first Iron Man, sees what his things can do if they're out of check, and he realizes maybe he's getting a little bit out of check and needs to put himself in check with the government. Even though I feel like that's a bit contradictory, because in the first Iron Man, he fought to get his tech out of the government hands and hide it from the government, and he was like, I'm the only one who should be able to have this sort of tech at my disposal. So it feels a bit contradictory for Iron Man to really be doing that, but I think it still works. I think you can still he's believing the checks and balances that he needs. He needs the government to come in and step in for him because he's losing control, even though it feels a little bit contradictory since he literally just fought to get his tech out of the government's hands. Either way though, this is still a fantastic movie. You get pretty much all the Avengers there, and they're all doing their A game. This is easily going in top tier. Fantastic movie. You know what? Actually, I'm going to move it above the first Iron Man, actually. I don't think it's as good as the first Avengers, but that's right where it deserves to be. Next up, we got Doctor Strange. This is possibly the movie with the coolest visuals in all the MCU. I love the Inception style of world-bending visuals in this. That's the main draw here, if we're gonna be honest. Benedict Cumberbatch is also another big draw. He's very charismatic and very charming, and I love him in this role, and especially he became one of my favorites for a good bit, to the point where he became one of people's big favorites for a little bit, to the point where people wanted him to be the new leader of the MCU because he's just such a cool character and he's actually portrayed well. This movie, I think, really suffers like a lot of Marvel movies with its villain. The villain isn't the best here. I can't even remember his name. There's Dormammu, which is the big villain. That's the memorable part of the movie. Dormammu, I've come to bargain. Like that's a good scene right there. But Mads Mikkelsen's character, I don't even remember what his name was. He's kind of forgettable. He's kind of there to be a adversary to move the plot forward, which I think is okay, because I don't think you need the biggest of baddies in this film. It's just kind of very Marvel formula, very Marvel formulaic. Jesus. In this film, which I think is fine enough, but it does drag it down from being top tier Marvel, and to me, it ends up kind of it's above the first Ant-Man, no denying, but it kind of stays in that good movie, no denying category, because it's just not quite top tier because of that. Next up, we got Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2. This is one of my most infamous opinions. Whenever I bring it up to anyone, when I say I didn't like Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2, they freak the fuck out at me. And I get it, because I can understand why people like this film. I think there's so much good in this film. It's kind of like the first Avengers to me. There's so much good in this film. I love the emotional stuff with Yondu and Star-Lord. I love some of the humor in this film, even though I feel like the main joke here is Drax and Mantis, and I feel like that's overplayed a little bit. I feel like Drax and Mantis are done better in future films. I feel like it's kind of the same joke over and over, that Drax thinks Mantis is ugly, and it's a little bit overused, so it gets a bit boring by the end of the movie. I also feel like the action here was a big step down from even the first Guardians. I feel like Baby Groot has some cute moments, but he's really annoying at the end of the day. At the end of the day, though, I watched this film again. I did a whole Guardians marathon with myself. I watched the first, second, and third all on the same day, and watching them all in order gave me a bit more appreciation for this movie. I used to have it on the same level as Age of Ultron. I think it has moved up. I think it is officially in the enjoyable movie category. I will officially retcon my opinion like Trevor in Shang-Chi. I don't think it's much higher than that, and I think it's just barely an enjoyable movie, but seeing how all the characters, play out through all the films made me appreciate Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2 just a little more. People can stop fucking crying to me now. Next up, we got boom, Spider-Man Homecoming. The one film I think no one expected to come into the Marvel Cinematic Universe, because Spider-Man's obviously Sony, and it's probably Sony's biggest box office draw, so why the fuck would they let Marvel have their hands on him? Well, I'm glad they did, because I think this film's fantastic. I love Spider-Man Homecoming. I think the Vulture is one of the most compelling villains, because he's not this big evil guy who's trying to take over the world. At his heart, he's just a family man who feels robbed by the system and is trying to just make a living for his family. There's a little bit, it's almost more compelling on just taking it back a step, a smaller scale for the villain. What really drew that home is that scene where Peter rings a doorbell and Vulture opens the door, and he's just regular, he just seems like a dad, and it's like wow, this is not like an evil guy. And then you go from that to him pulling a gun on a teenager in a parking lot. And then you're like, wow, this is a kind of fucked up guy. I also love Spider-Man and Tony Stark's relationship in this movie. I think the mentorship, I know people don't like the suit. I don't really have a problem with it. I think it works, and I think it works in the MCU how it's set up. I don't mind that we didn't get another classic Spider-Man story, because I didn't really need another classic Spider-Man story. I like that they did something different. Overall, everything for this movie works for me. I still, it's sad because everything works, but still for some reason, the final fight is just kind of a letdown, and I just don't like how the movie resolves, if that makes sense. I think it's just him getting the suit taken away, and then he goes and stops one guy from robbing Tony Stark, and then he immediately is offered an Avengers role. It seems like it just really rushed into that a bit too fast, and that ending just kind of drags it down a little bit, because if they ended it just a little bit better, this movie could have easily been top tier Marvel. A movie that is top tier Marvel, however, Thor Ragnarok. Finally, Thor got a good fucking movie, and I feel like everyone agrees that Thor Ragnarok is amazing. After two kind of dull, bland movies, Taika Waititi came in and just gave this movie a splash of color. You can even tell by the poster. Look at the other two posters for the movies, and then look at this poster. Just the poster just screams fun and colorful, and that's what the whole movie is. The humor, I feel like sometimes it's a bit too colorful, especially with the humor. There's sometimes you'll literally watch Asgard, their home get destroyed, and they immediately cut to a joke. Sometimes the humor just really undercuts the tension. action, even though it can be funny, and most of the time it is really funny and lands, especially Korg. I think Korg is hilarious in this film. I think they overuse Korg a lot in future films, but I think in this film he is perfect side character comedy relief. I liked Hulk and Thor's relationship in this. I loved Loki in the movie. I think Loki, this is where he really started shining for me. The sister being the surprise sibling that is revealed to them right as Odin dies, I thought that was kind of cheap. I didn't really care for that at all, but she's a fine enough villain that draws the plot forward, and she is a bit intimidating and actually poses a threat to Thor, which is good because the last two movies didn't really have a villain that posed a threat to Thor. So there's enough going on here. It works well enough that it easily deserves to be in top tier, even if just barely. Moving on, we're about halfway there, folks. We're not even halfway there. Can you believe that? Jesus Christ. Moving on, we got Black Panther. This is a film that I feel is stuck in like the 2012, 2014 era, but it came out in 2018. This film, mainly the humor, if this film would have taken out the humor, this would have been top tier Marvel. But every time the humor comes in here, it doesn't work. They just did not know how to make humor. None of the actors seem like they're really giving their best with the humor, so none of it lands. They have a "what are those" joke in this movie in 2018. That's fucking pathetic. The CGI is pathetic in this movie. It's really bad. Other than that, though, a lot of the problems I've had with Marvel movies are the villain, right? And this film finally had a great fucking villain in it. Killmonger is one of the best villains in the MCU. Chadwick Boseman is obviously fantastic as Black Panther. I don't think you need any introductory on that. He's the biggest reason why the second one didn't work, is his absence. So this movie has a lot going for it, and the serious moments are fantastic, and when the villain just gets to shine, he's fantastic. There's a lot working in this movie, but sadly, there's just enough humor drawbacks that I can't help but just put this one. We'll put it above Ant-Man. It's definitely better than Ant-Man, but man, I wish they would have, taken this one a bit more seriously, and you would have had a fucking winner here. Boom. Let's finally talk about it. Spoiler alert, I think this is the best film in the MCU. I do not know how they managed it. Just look at how many names are on the fucking poster alone. I thought this movie was going to be super fucking overcrowded, was going to feel so rushed and crowded, and just would have been an absolute disaster, but somehow the Russo brothers pulled it off. I feel like this is the best film in the MCU. It manages comedy, it manages the serious moments, it has some fantastic action sequences, it has some of the biggest get up and cheer moments. They absolutely nailed it on this movie. It's fantastic. I love all the characters. Most of the characters are better here than they've ever been. I love how Thor plays off the Guardians. I love, obviously, Tony Stark and Spider-Man. I love Captain America and his little crew with with Wanda and Black Widow and all of them. Man, it's fantastic how they managed out. Even how Doctor Strange plays off this movie is fantastic. He, helps other people. He makes fun of other people. It's fantastic. Everything works. Everything works. And I think the biggest reason why it works is they let the villains lose. I totally was not expecting them to actually go in and let the villains lose, but man, just seeing the villains just take that, they let the heroes lose. That's why this movie works so well, is they actually just let the heroes lose. And it just creates that biggest sense of dread. You just feel like, man, I have to go see what they do next, because what the hell are they going to do next? I need to see that. And it's fantastic. It's fantastic. So as they did with the last Avengers movie, this Avengers movie takes things small scale. After you see your heroes just get fucking pounded, they decide to take you back with a fun, nice little adventure. Ant-Man the Wasp, that doesn't fucking work. I think this is a horrible movie. I think it's arguably one of the worst in the MCU. They almost took things too small scale to the point where you just don't give a shit about what's happening. Ghost is a forgettable character. I'm so surprised that they're bringing her back for Thunderbolts. I have no clue why they thought to do that. Paul Rudd the two things that still work in this movie are Paul Rudd, obviously, is very charismatic. You love seeing him. And Luis is obviously still the standout. He drags this movie up a little bit. But man, I couldn't care less. I honestly don't even remember who the villain is in this movie. I couldn't tell. Like, obviously Ghost, but she was just a henchman, right? There was like it was this guy. This guy was like the villain, and he was just like trying to steal the lab. I couldn't care less. I really couldn't. And this film was just an absolute snores fest. Michelle Pfeiffer's kind of come in. They save her from the quantum realm. You think that's going to tie in a little bit, but it doesn't. It seemed like they had no plan, and they just kind of, I don't know. I don't even know what the hell to say about this movie. It's easily the worst in the MCU for the fact that they went from the best movie in the MCU to instantly the worst is shocking, but they did. And the streak didn't stop there, because next we got Captain Marvel. Captain Marvel's not as bad. I don't think it really works. I hate the amnesia gimmick, because they knew they had a really overpowered character. How the hell do you make that work? Well, don't do it like this, because all they did was give the main character amnesia, and the third act is just her realizing she's better than everyone else, and then no one poses a threat to her at all. The twist for the villains is so predictable that it's almost eye-rollingly bad. Now, I don't hate this movie because of Brie Larson. I know a ton of people just hate Brie Larson, so they immediately hate this movie and everything she does. I don't think she's horrible in this movie. I think the script's horrible in this movie. I think that's the main problem here. And the only saving grace of this movie is seeing a younger, naive Samuel L. Jackson, but then they ruin that by giving him his eye patch from getting scratched by a fucking cat. There's just too much here that I really don't like. And yeah, I don't think it's as bad as Ant-Man and the Wasp, but it's definitely, it's down there, that's for sure. After that, we got Avengers Endgame. Avengers Endgame is a movie that I absolutely loved coming out of the theater, but the more and more I watch it, the more and more I realize how kind of wasted of potential it was. Now, don't get me wrong, still think the movie's fantastic. I still think it's a really good movie, but I don't think it's as good as it should have been. There's obviously some moments in here. The third act's fantastic. Cap picking up the hammer, the Avengers Assemble sequence. But right after all that happens, then you just get a big CGI fest of a big CGI army punching another CGI army for like 20 minutes. So it starts off really strong in that third act, but then it just like kind of dies off until the very end of the third act when you get Iron Man's death. There's kind of a whole wasted potential in between there. And the first 2 hours, very fun fan service, going back to some of the best moments in the MCU and kind of viewing them from a different perspective. You get Cap fighting Cap and all that. There's some really fun moments, but it's not something that I would necessarily say is like a great movie. It works really well when you're first watching the MCU and you get to this movie and you watch it for the first time in theaters, but it's not something that absolutely is like a fantastic movie and knocks everything out of the park. I'd love to place this movie higher and put it in top tier Marvel, but I just don't think it lands in top tier Marvel quite. I think it's at the top of good movie, no denying, but it's not quite top tier Marvel because it doesn't really have a good story to it. It's just 3 hours of fan service, which I think is totally fine. It earned that. It's great at doing it, but nothing really makes it a top tier movie. The final film of Phase 3, Spider-Man No Way Home. Spider-Man Far From Home. This movie is another kind of weird one. Again, really liked it when I came out of the theater watching it. I thought it was super funny and charming, and it takes a movie like Endgame, which was super big and emotional, and just kind of small scales it a little bit and tells a story with a character we all love. And I think there's some real standouts here. I love Jake Gyllenhaal. How do you say his last name? I think it's Gyllenhaal, something like that. As Mysterio, I love Jake Gyllenhaal. And Mysterio in this movie, he seems like he's having a blast playing it. The Mysterio sequence, like before the final act, like the first Mysterio sequence, is one of the best in the MCU. I think that shit's awesome. I wish they played more into that in the final act. But overall, there's a lot of funny jokes in here. A lot of the humor works. But the premise of the movie, if we step back and just think about the premise, Tony Stark left this world-destroying defense system in the hands of a teenager that has been dead for the last 5 years that he did not know if they were going to get back to life or not. He left it in his hands. What? That makes no sense of why he would do that. And then beyond that, he left the glasses without any instructions. He has left it with a simple little quote that was pretty vague and leads to Peter fucking up immediately and having to fix it. So, man, I enjoy this film, but you sit back and you think about that premise and it makes no fucking sense. And I'm sorry, it has to be in the enjoyable but flawed tier. because I still think it's a fun movie. It's an enjoyable movie, but man, there's a lot of flaws in this movie. Moving on to phase 4, they brought in TV shows. Now, I actually, before these TV shows started, I thought they were fucking fabulous ideas. Taking these side characters are some of the most loved in the MCU and giving them the spotlight in a not as big production so they can, actually have the spotlight, and it'll make, because they obviously don't have the star power for a movie, but they're fan beloved, and giving them a nice little show. We got WandaVision, and for like the first 5 episodes of WandaVision, I was like, wow, they nailed it. These shows are going to be epic. It's giving us more MCU with these side characters, but then the problem happened, and I started realizing, wow, by episode 6, they have not closed off a single plot line in the show. In fact, they're still opening plot lines. And then 7, they continue to just open plot lines. And then episode 8, they continue to open plot lines. And then episode 9 was like the shortest of the series, and they rushed it all and didn't have time to close out all the plot lines, which led to like stuff like Quicksilver being a boner joke and stuff like that. Why? Like, why would you just take time and end it? It's like they want to keep people coming back every week, so they keep giving you plot lines. Come back next week for this, come back next week for this, and then end it off all in the finale, and it feels super rushed and kind of ruins the show for me, even though I really like what they did with like the first few episodes. And there's some real standout episodes here. The Halloween episode is fantastic. There's some others that are fantastic. Jimmy Woo's fantastic, but man, the ending is so rushed. I'm sure this is a problem we will not see in any other Marvel TV show, but I have to put WandaVision. I'll give it enjoyable but flawed, because I don't think it's one of the worst TV shows, but man, it really drops the ball in the finale. Talking about dropping the ball in the finale, Falcon the Winter Soldier. When this was announced, this seems like the easiest win for any Marvel project ever. You're taking the buddy cop formula with 2 of the most beloved side characters in the MCU and giving them a show together. Easy victory. Like, I thought there was no way this was failed. I was so hyped for this, and fucking hell, they dropped the ball again. You want to know why? First 5 episodes, I actually really like. I especially think the 5th episode with that fight with John Walker at the beginning is fantastic. And I love the journey Sam Wilson goes on this movie, and I hope that's played into a little more in the new Captain America coming out, even though his suit is fucking ass. But the ending is so rushed. The show ended like, I'm sorry, but that like pep talk Sam gave the governor, "You have to do better, Senator." Okay, like, it's really just, I'm sorry, they fucking dropped the ball in the ending, and the ending ruins the entire show again. It really pains me. Like, I'm gonna put it, because it's hard to rate these, because I love some of the first episodes. Like, there's some really good episodes to this, but because of how fucking bad they dropped the ball in the finale, I have to put it in the I could have made it better. Because, damn, I don't know if you can tell, but I'm really heartbroken about it, because it should have been such an easy win for them. One of the only shows that I think actually works is Loki. Loki, if you're gonna watch one of the Marvel shows, watch Loki. This is one where it actually ended well. So I liked the first 5 episodes, and I actually liked the finale. I thought stuff worked really well here. This was obviously the first time we got to see Kang, or He Who Remains. Loki is one of like the most beloved characters in the MCU, and they bring in Mobius, which instantly became one of my favorite characters in the MCU. If that man doesn't get to ride a jet ski in Loki season 2, I'm going to be upset. But yeah, a lot here works. I like the character of Sylvie. I wonder if she's ever going to come back, probably. But this was the first one where they actually let the ending work, and it took its time, and it actually started closing off some plot lines before the fucking finale. This is a good TV show, no deny. I'm gonna put it above some of these. We're gonna put it right there. It deserves to be right there. Actually, a good TV show. If you're gonna watch any of the Marvel TV shows, watch Loki, because it actually kind of nailed it, in my opinion. Next up, we have Black Widow. Black Widow was a fun film. It was nice to get an MCU film, because I think there was like 2019 to 2021, that's like a 2-year gap. That's insane for Marvel to take 2 years before a movie, but obviously a pandemic happened, so it couldn't put out movies. Black Widow's was, at the time, I feel like I was a bit more positive on this film, because it was just fun to get another MCU film, and I remember enjoying it in the theater just because I hadn't seen an MCU movie in a theater for a while. But this film feels so out of place. I feel like this film would still be really good if it came right after Civil War, because this movie takes place right after Civil War, but they positioned it as the first movie of Phase 4 it just made no sense why you would start off phase 4 with a character that's already dead. I feel like there's much better ways to kick it off. I feel like that's a problem with most of phase 4 and why it feels so disjointed. It just seems like they're putting out movies and they don't really connect at all, which is fine, but Marvel's already established connection in their films. I also think the villain having his smell powers is super fucking goofy here. It's so stupid. Well, I think the standout here is obviously Red Guardian and Yelena. I can't wait to see them come back in Thunderbolts, because especially Yelena was a really standout. I can't wait to see more of her. She obviously appears in Hawkeye again, and she's a standout there. But they really dropped the ball on characters like Taskmaster, and I didn't really care for what Black Widow went through because I knew where Black Widow ended up. So why the hell would I care what she goes through in this film? So overall, I feel like back when I first watched it, this would have probably been in the enjoyable movie category, but I think it's got to go in what the fuck now, because there is some good things that keep it out of like bottom tier Marvel, but it's not great. It's not great. Next up, we got What If, another idea that I thought was pretty creative and cool. It was cool to see the MCU go animation, and I think there is some standout episodes here. I like the Ultra Vision or whatever he's called in the show. I really like the Doctor Strange episode. It's fantastic. I would honestly recommend going and watching that Doctor Strange episode, because if I could just rate that Doctor Strange episode, that would be top tier Marvel. But most of this show just kind of falls flat. I thought they kind of took some really stupid, like, what if Peggy Carter got the superhero serum? Like, cool, but I don't really care enough. It was cool to see. It was really nice to see Chadwick Boseman get his final role in the MCU. But what if T'Challa was Star-Lord? Really? That's what you're gonna do with it? I thought that was such a stupid idea as well. The Marvel Zombie episode sounded like a good idea, but that was arguably the worst one here. There was just so much here that didn't work as well as I wanted it to. Sadly, even though the Doctor Strange episode is really good, it's gonna be put in the I could have made it better, because I feel like I could have come up with better ideas for them to use for that show on the top of my head. Next film is finally, it took a while to get there in phase 4, but finally a great film in phase 4. I consider this to be like top tier Marvel. I love Shang-Chi. I think the villain here, the father-son relationship, always just makes the villain hit harder, especially since, you know, fighting for family is something. I feel like it's pretty compelling, even if it's a bit overdone. It's overdone because it's an easy way to make something compelling. I thought Simu Liu, I hadn't seen him in any stuff. I know he's in that, there was like one TV show he was in that I know a bunch of people knew him from. I don't remember the name of it. I'd never seen him, but he knocked it at the park. I remember thinking after seeing this film that Shang-Chi was gonna be like the leader of the MCU. They were gonna like position him to be like that main guy, because I thought he kind of had that prowess to him. The action here is some of the best action in the MCU. That bus fight scene is fantastic. I love the fight on the scaffolding. I love the ending fight where it just goes all out like crazy with the dragons and everything. I think everything works. I thought some of the humor here was kind of hit or miss. Some of the jokes landed, some didn't. But overall, everything works in this movie. The Trevor stuff was mainly what I'm talking about with humor. I didn't really care for what they did with Trevor and his stupid little fuzzy animal. But other than that stuff, this film is easily top tier. I'm going to put it above Thor Ragnarok, above the original. No, I'm not going to put it above the original Iron Man. It's going to go above Thor Ragnarok and be in that top tier. Boys, I'm sorry. It's editor slosh here. I completely forgot about Eternals. It's the most forgettable movie in the MCU. I think I've proven that point because I completely forgot to even include it on the tier list. This movie is pretty bad. It's not, well, I wouldn't say it's even necessarily bad. It's just so boring, dude. They did nothing creative with this film, and for that reason, I'm going to put it right about there. I feel like that's where it deserves. That's where it's going to get. I'm so sorry for my sins. You see all these blank spots because I'm actually done with the tier list. You're just not seeing any of it yet because you gotta keep watching the video for that. Now back to the original cut. You won't see Eternals there. My bad. What do you want from me? Kill me. Next up, we got Hawkeye. Hawkeye, like the story with most of these TV shows, should have been an easy win for Marvel. You have Kingpin coming back from the Daredevil show. They completely neutered him, though. You have one of the fan favorite characters in Jeremy Renner's Hawkeye. He's kind of sidelined in his own fucking show again, because the show is only titled after him. You might as well put him in the background to put Kate Bishop more in the front seat, which is fine, because I think Haley Steinfeld does deliver a fun performance and she's a fun character, but I would much have preferred to see more Hawkeye in the Hawkeye show. Yelena Belova comes in as a fun, she's only in it for like an episode or two if I remember right, but she's one of the standouts, so obviously can't wait to see more of her. She's been one of the best parts of the MCU recently. But yeah, man, I wish they would have taken more time to let the Hawkeye show focus on Hawkeye. What was the enemy's names? Like the jumpsuit gang or something? I don't remember what they're called, but yeah, they were really fucking annoying. I thought they seemed like they were trying to make them like kind of these funny, dumb henchmen, but they were just annoying most of the time. Yeah, this is kind of a bummer that I had to put it this low, because man, it should have been such an easy win for them. All they had to do was make a show about Hawkeye, and they fucked that up. Next, we're going into Spider-Man No Way Home. This is another one that I actually think is really good. I love the last hour and a half of this movie. See, this movie is the opposite of Captain America, the First Avenger, because the last hour and a half of this movie, once Toby and Andrew enter the scene, is so emotional. It hits all the right notes, and it's so great. There's even another little fun cameo with Daredevil making his appearance again. That last hour and a half is so fantastic, but it kind of seems like they had that last hour and a half in mind and were like, wow, that'd be something really cool to do. But they didn't really have a setup on how to get there. So ultimately, you start thinking of what happens. Peter is a dumb idiot again, even though he kind of grew out of that in the last film, but he goes to Doctor Strange to wipe the memory of the entire planet because he couldn't get into college. And Doctor Strange goes along with it. And I'm like, are you serious? Why did they completely make these characters that are shown to be pretty smart people? Fucking Peter was going to MIT for Christ's sake, and he doesn't know that you can call a college to, plead your case? Are you serious? And Doctor Strange just goes along with it because he's feeling pity for the guy? It's such a stupid premise to set up the film, but what comes after it is so good that I can't help myself but put it in a top tier Marvel. It's not going to be one of the highest on the list. I will put it above Thor Ragnarok, but it's going to sit comfortably right there because, man, I wish they could have had a little bit better of a way to get it there, Up after that is Moon Knight. Can you predict what I'm about to say? An easy win. You have Oscar-level actor Oscar Isaac playing one of the coolest characters with one of the coolest mythologies in the MCU. You have Ethan fucking Hawke playing the villain in the show. And what did they do? They delivered a couple of really great episodes. They drew me in so fucking much. I was like, they're gonna nail it this time. I loved the first few episodes for the show, but then they start to just do nothing. And then the ending feels super rushed when they have to jam-pack everything into the finale. Man, it's upsetting, because this show was so good for those first 2 or 3 episodes. To see episode 4 and 5 just them do absolutely nothing with the plot, and then episode 6 they were just rushing everything into it. It's really upsetting. I thought some of the action here was really cool. I thought it was kind of cool what they did with Jake, where he passes out and then comes back and everything's destroyed. I felt they used that cop out one too many times. I would have liked to see in the finale him pass out and Jake just come out and actually have some cool ass fight scene. But that's whatever. The show, it really hurts me to do this because this could have been such an easy win for Marvel, and it should have been such an easy win, but it has to be. I can't put it in the what the fuck tier because it's not that bad, but it's in the enjoyable but flawed tier, and it's not quite above WandaVision, but it's not quite as bad as Black Widow. After that, we get another one of my kind of polarizing decisions on the MCU with Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness. I really like Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness. I didn't love it. It should have been a lot better than it was. You call your movie Multiverse of Madness, and your Multiverse of Madness is you go on red and you stop on green and pizza served in a bowl. That's the madness of the multiverse that you want to show us. They could have done a lot more with the multiverse, but I thought the stuff between Wanda and Doctor Strange and even America Chavez, that all kind of worked for me. I liked how it just felt like a Sam Raimi film. Most of these recent Marvel films in Phase 4 and 5 have kind of felt so formulaic and they're really shoving things through just a corporate fucking system that none of it has any style anymore. And it's nice to see Sam Raimi just come in and, especially during the end when Zombie Strange happens, just go full fucking Sam Raimi on that. It was fantastic. I loved seeing that. So there's so much here that I like, but there's a lot of shit that brings it back. I hate how they gave us John Krasinski as Mr. Fantastic just so he probably won't end up actually playing Mr. Fantastic, because I love John Krasinski. I've been waiting so long to get that announcement, and it's probably not going to happen, and he does nothing in this film as Mr. Fantastic, so for that, it's at the bottom of a good movie, no denying. It would have been higher, but they took John Krasinski, Mr. Fantastic, away from me too soon, so too fucking bad. Next up, we have Miss Marvel. This is weird, because Miss Marvel is actually quite different from most of the other TV shows. Miss Marvel, I thought the trailers, I was almost about to skip the show, because I was like, wow, these trailers really don't, it doesn't seem like it's my sort of show. I don't think I'm going to like this at all. And the first couple of episodes really confirmed my suspicion. I was like, wow, this is really a show made for like people with 2 brain cells or children. But then as the show went on, it honestly kind of hooked me a bit more. And the ending, I think this show has probably the best finale episode of any of the shows so far. So as the show went on, I actually started liking it more and more, which left a better taste in my mouth to the point where I'm actually going to put it a bit higher than most of these other shows. I also think Iman Vellani is pretty fun as this character. I think she's the only reason I'm even somewhat excited to see the Marvels, is because I think she's pretty fun. So yeah, I'll put it in the enjoyable TV show tier, I guess. I guess I should have added that, shouldn't I have? Next up, we got another very big disappointment out of Phase 4, because Phase 4 didn't have enough of those. Thor: Love and Thunder. Man, this one had fantastic trailers. I loved every trailer we got. You have 2 very charismatic leads that work well together. Chris Hemsworth and Natalie Portman and Tessa Thompson all work very well together. You have Christian fucking Bale playing the villain, and not just the villain, Gore the God Butcherer, but they shove him to the side and turn it into a fucking cheap comedy for the whole film. And it's so upsetting to see, because this movie could have been so good. It had everything going for it. The trailers are fantastic. And the first time I went to the film to go see it, and I actually came out really enjoying it for the first time, because I was like, wow, this is actually pretty fun. I came out with some laughs, and I was like, wow, I enjoyed it. But I rewatched it after the comedy aspect had settled, and I was like, wow, this film doesn't work at all. This film is pretty bad, which is why originally when I scored it, I gave it like an 80 or something out of 100. It's not an 80 out of 100. I completely retconned that. It just gave me a bunch of laughs, because the comedy here does work for the first viewing, but after the jokes don't land anymore, you can start seeing into the problems of this film. This film has so much wasted potential. I still think Taika Waititi is a great director. I'm not one of those people who's like, never let him work on another film again. He sucks. Because he still has Thor Ragnarok, he still has Jojo Rabbit, he's still a fantastic director. It's just he dropped the ball on this one big time. I'm going to put it in the enjoyable but flawed, because no, you know what, it's going to go at the top of what the fuck, because it's just like, what the fuck, man, you know? Next we go in, I retcon what I said about Ant-Man and the Wasp. This is actually, I forgot this even came out. This is the worst thing the MCU's done. Boom, She-Hulk. This is the only Marvel project in Phase 4 that I went into thinking it was going to be bad, and actually was bad. The trailers for this movie looked so bad, the CGI looked awful, and it is awful. Nothing in the show works. The only thing that works is Daredevil. He comes in for 1 episode, he has a little appearance, and it's fun to see, and that's just, it works because it's fun to see this character that I love from the Netflix show appear again and get his like fight scenes and everything. It just seems like it was really shoved in there to give people a reason to watch, because there's, you know, there he is. But overall, this TV show was just such a fucking chore to sit through. The fourth wall breaking at the end didn't work at all, because the MCU hasn't been set up as something like that, and now that just really puts it. I don't know how they're gonna continue with this character in the MCU, because I don't know how she's gonna work with the rest. Like maybe Deadpool she could work with, because Deadpool's also fourth wall breaking, but the MCU hasn't been a fourth wall breaking thing so far, so you just have her literally climb out of your TV screen, which I think could have worked, but they did it in such a way where it was like really like it didn't work. It instead of like just making me like, wow, that's clever, it just took me out of the film or out of the TV show completely. Man, all the side characters in this film, this TV show are so annoying. They bring in fucking Megan Thee Stallion just to have a twerking scene, and they describe the show as a sex positive show for children. It makes no sense to me how this thing was even made. This is by far the worst thing the MCU's done. I hope to dear God we never get a She-Hulk season 2, because I will probably not be watching it. Honestly, I don't even want to put this thing on the fucking tier list. It's just such a stain, you know? We're gonna put it like down here so you can just barely see it. It's just gonna be just just get rid of that one. I don't want to see it. Then we got Black Panther. Now I was really hoping for this film. Obviously, this film was obviously dealt a really bad hand with the pandemic and the passing of Chadwick Boseman. This film was absolutely dealt the worst hand out of any film on this list. But besides that, I believed in Ryan Coogler, and I think Ryan Coogler delivered the best project he could have here. It's nice to see an MCU film which up until this point was the first in a while that didn't lean heavily into comedy, which is good because I think you learned from Black Panther that he's not the best at comedy, so I think it's good that they kind of left out most of the comedy. I still don't really like some of the directions they went with this film. Giving the new Black Panther mantle to Shuri made no sense. She's never been known to be a fighter. You have literally two other fighters. Like, you could have given it to any of these people that are all established fighters. You could have given it to any of the people on the poster. Any other person of those four on the poster, other than Shuri, would have been a better option to make the new Black Panther because they all have actual fighting experience. I don't get why they decided to give it to Shuri just because she's the sister, even though she's like probably the weakest out of all of them. It made no sense. I thought Namor was a cool villain, but I didn't think he was really that deep or anything. I just thought he was cool, and that was pretty much it. And this movie just felt really long too. It felt like it was really dragging out some plot points. Overall, this movie was kind of a disappointment. I still think it's pretty good. I didn't really go back. Would I ever really watch it again? No, unless I was doing like my MCU rewatch. But it's definitely deserving of being. We're gonna put it above Miss Marvel, above Guardians 2, above Captain America, and I think it'll comfortably find its place right there. We're nearing the end here, and let's talk about another shitty, upsetting film, Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania. Looking back on it, I don't understand why they took Ant-Man and made him this big thing. Ant-Man's always been the character that they use after an Avengers film to make, reset the stakes a little bit and just give you a fun little film whether it works or not. This time they decided to make him the main. The first film with Kang is fucking Ant-Man. It makes Kang seem like such a bitch because he was defeated by ants at the end. Literal ants. How am I supposed to feel like, oh yeah, the Avengers won't be able to fucking take on Kang when ants defeated him? And this is supposed to be the most powerful fucking Kang. This is the one that they exiled because he was so fucking powerful. And ants defeated him. How does that pose? That makes Kang seem like the biggest bitch in the MCU. And now you're gonna make him like the main villain? He has a whole fucking Avengers film named after him? And ants defeated him. I thought Jonathan Majors' performance was great. Whether or not we're even going to continue seeing him is yet to be seen. But discarding all that, his performance in this movie was great. But ants defeated him. It makes I'm sorry, that's so baffling to me. Paul Rudd's still pretty charismatic. I thought Paul Rudd's daughter in this movie was pretty useless. I just think they wanted to put another big name actor in there, so they just got Kathryn Newton and was like, hey, you want to be in a Marvel film? And she was like, yeah, I need a paycheck. And Marvel was like, great, we got a movie for you. Cool. And then that's how that worked. Bill Murray, I thought was going to be how Jeff Goldblum was like a nice little fun cameo in Thor Ragnarok? Kind of thought that's what Bill Murray was going to be, but no, he just kind of comes in and does a lot of sex jokes that him and Michelle Pfeiffer fucked in the quantum realm a lot. And it's just like, wow, that's really not funny. And you're sitting on this joke for way too long. And it's almost uncomfortable. It's like hearing your grandparents talk about sex. It's really uncomfortable. And this film MODOK was a huge disappointment. This film, not as bad as She-Hulk, but man, it dropped the fucking ball. And it was the first film. This is when I really started to lose faith in Marvel. I obviously still went to go see Guardians. I'm still gonna go see the movies, but Marvel officially lost its magic with this film. You used to be able to go in to a Marvel film and have a certain level of expectation of greatness attached to it. Marvel officially lost its magic with Ant-Man. And even though you have films like Boom, Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3 that are fantastic. Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3, this is why I waited to make this video. I was going to make this video back with Ant-Man, but I didn't want to leave it off on such a bad note. Guardians 3 brings it back to a good note. I've already seen this film 4 times in theaters. I'm not even joking about that, 4 times. I love this movie. These are my favorite set of characters. I love Chris Pratt. He's my favorite actor. James Gunn gives this... I honestly almost thought he was going to just phone it in a little bit since it's his last Marvel project, but he doesn't. He brings all of his heart and soul here. They really make Rocket like the standout, and that's one thing I noticed. Like, he really does kind of feel like the secret protagonist when you rewatch all of them in order, because Rocket easily becomes like the best Guardian here. Like, he's easily the best of them all in terms of character-wise. His whole backstory is so great and well done. Drax and Mantis have never been better here. Nebula's a big star here. She's never been better as well. I didn't really get what the point of Cosmo was. It seems like they kind of brought in Cosmo. I'm sure Cosmo will do more stuff later, but she's doesn't do much. The biggest disappointments with the film, the only really problems that I have were the villains. I actually have grown on the High Evolutionary. It's not because I was watching, I forget what video I was watching, but I was watching someone talk about it, and they brought up a good point. It's nice to just have a villain that you can hate again. I feel like you look back on some of these and they try to have villains that are like relatable and have like conflicts that, oh, I can agree with because they're trying to mimic Thanos a lot. It's nice to just have a villain that's like, you love, like the final fight with him is, he doesn't even get to throw a punch. He just gets the fucking shit beat out of him. And it's almost nice to see just because you hate him so much. So that aspect's grown on me a little bit. However, Adam Warlock still hasn't. Adam Warlock does nothing in this fucking movie. I don't get why the hell they had Adam Warlock. Big bummer because Adam Warlock's such a cool character in the comics. But, oh well, what can you do? Overall, this film, I'm glad to say we're ending off on a good note. I am going to put it in the top tier Marvel. I am going to put it just barely above Captain America. Fuck it, you know, barely above the first Avengers. Guardians 3 sits comfortably in like top tier Marvel. It gets put right there. I also appreciate that Guardians 3, just like with Doctor Strange, felt like a James Gunn. I kind of talked about that earlier, where it has the heart and soul of a James Gunn film. I like that it actually felt like a James Gunn film, because again, most of these Marvel films, like Ant-Man, like She-Hulk, like all that, just feel so fucking pushed through the formula. It's nice to see a James Gunn film again. I almost forgot about the Disney Plus special presentations. Werewolf by Night. Werewolf by Night, actually, again, just like with Guardians, has a very unique style to it that we haven't seen in the MCU. I like the black and white sort of aesthetic. I think there's a cool lore and characters here. I wouldn't mind seeing again if they ever do come back again. This might have just been a one-off that they never touch again, but if they do, I'd be more than okay with it. I'm going to just barely, it's gonna go right there. Right there. And then finally, the final thing we're going to talk about in the official MCU tier list, this video has been much longer than I thought it would be, is the Guardians of the Galaxy Holiday Special. Again, James Gunn knocked it out of the park. I thought this thing looked so stupid. I thought it was going to be a little throwaway thing before we get the meat in Guardians 3. But man, I watched this film, I don't know why I keep doubting James Gunn when you can't doubt James Gunn. He comes in, he puts so much heart and soul into this, you can't help but love it. It's something I'm probably going to rewatch every time the holidays come around. It's just so fun. Drax and Mantis easily are their best here, even better than Guardians 3 or Guardians 2. Man, it's so much fun to see. And then the whole plot with Kevin Bacon, and then you get the reveal that Mantis and Star-Lord are brother and sister. It's a nice little thing, even though they don't play into that too much in Guardians 3. It's a nice little just heartwarming thing. I don't feel like I should be able to put this that high since it's a special, but man, it's gonna barely sneak its way into the top tier. The Guardians films are just some of the greatest, bro. Overall, there it is, boys. There is your official MCU. We'll bring this back up because I don't mind to see it now. The official opinions, the official MCU tier list, not even the official opinions. Why did I say that? The official fact. Don't disagree with it. This is the only tier list that matters. It is the correct tier list. Looking at this, I'm actually really shocked. Holy fuck, there's so many Marvel projects. Could you imagine having to start off and watching Marvel projects now? You'd be so fucking lost. It is the longest, it's the most expensive TV show, honestly, is what it is. But yeah, there it is. There was the opinions. There was the fact. I'll see you all next time, and toodles.